Good morning. It is time for video number 2 in the Author Fears series that I'm doing this week. And I hope you guys got a chance to check out the video from yesterday. We were talking about how a lot of people feel exposed when they are writing their books. They feel like they're standing in the middle of the room, everybody's staring at them, and they forgot something very important in their wardrobe. So we talked a little bit about that yesterday. I hope you can go back and review that video if you didn't get to see it yet. It was some really good stuff to help you get over that particular fear. I know that's something really huge that helps people, that kind of keeps people from writing their books. And today I wanted to talk about the author fear, no one will read this. And I know it sounds kind of ridiculous for people to think, oh, I really want to write a book, but nobody's going to read it. But it turns into this vicious cycle where you feel like you want to put all this time into this project, you want to pour your heart out, you want to get this out to the world, and no one's going to read it at all. It feels like you're standing there just yelling at a wall, trying to get it to clean up the playroom. I don't know. Maybe I have some experience with that. So this is something that can really keep people from writing their books. You feel like, what's the point of me putting all this time into a project that no one's going to even bother reading? Why would I spend my hard-earned like spare time or cut out part of my work day to actually work on something if I believe that nobody's going to read it, nobody's going to care, and then all of that kind of garbage turns into a reflection of who you are and who you believe you are. So then you start feeling like, oh, there are all these people who are huge in my industry, there are all these people who are writing books, and people are paying attention to them. Why would they pay attention to me? Why would they bother reading my book? Why would anyone care what I have to write? So it ends up being this huge mind game that we get caught in. And I want to tell you something a little bit funny about this, because I kind of have this same fear. I've had this a lot, but it doesn't really feel like a fear to me, because the way it shows up in my life is that it's kind of the opposite sort of thing. It's not just nobody's going to read this, so why bother? Because I do write, I love to write. It's something I just really enjoy. I love doing videos. I love getting up in front of people and doing things. But every time I go to do that stuff, what happens in my head is, well, nobody's going to see it anyway, so I can do whatever I want. I could, run across the room and just dance and wave my arms around, be silly. Nobody's going to watch this video. I can write whatever I want in this book because nobody's going to read this book. So it ends up being a sabotage in the opposite direction, because then I don't feel like I need to put forth that effort sometimes. And so I have to stop myself in the middle of that cycle and say, okay, maybe one person's going to watch this and it's really going to help them. Or maybe one person's going to read this and it's really going to help them. So that helps me hone in on what I'm actually doing and why it's so important. So here's the other side of that, though. No matter whether you think that no one's going to read it, so why bother? Or no one's going to read it, so I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff together and be like, hey, I'm a published author. Whichever end of that you're suffering from, you have to step back and look at it from the perspective of, if I plan, then yes, people are going to read this. And I mean, the truth is, the right people will read your book. It's not going to be for everybody. And maybe you won't sell 1 million copies, but the right people will be reading your book. And it's part of a whole. It's not just, I have to write this book and then I'm just going to stick it up on the shelf. You have to do a lot of planning around it, figure out how you're going to actually get people to read that book. You have to decide, I do a lot of speaking events, so I'm going to set up a table at the back of the room, and at the end of my talk, I'll say, please come to me at the back. What I gave you in the talk was just a little bit of my story, and my book has the rest of the story in it. I want you to read it, and I want you to get a lot out of it. So if you make a plan and say, this is what I want to actually do with the book, instead of just, I'm going to write this book and, you know, wave a magic wand and hope that somebody reads it. It doesn't work that way. You can't really just stick your book up on Amazon and hope somebody will stumble across it, any more than you stick a website up and hope that you're going to get clients. It's the same sort of thing. You have to have some sort of planning. You have to have marketing. You have to have an idea of what you want to do with the book to actually get people to read it. So if you start out with that perspective, if you start thinking, oh boy, nobody's going to read this book because I have no idea what I'm doing, that one is a pretty easy one. You can actually reach out and say, hey, I need a marketer. Hey, I need a coach. Hey, I need, you know, XYZ to be able to get through the process, get it out there to the world. But a lot of times it's a little deeper than that. It's not just, oh, I'm missing somebody on my team. It's, nobody's going to read this book because I'm not worthy of sharing my story. Or nobody's going to read this book because I'm a terrible writer. Nobody's going to read this book because I suck at what I do. And if you're watching this video and you're interested in writing a book, then you probably don't need to worry about any of that. You either have some clients, you have a lot of clients, or you have your eye on getting started with your business and, you know, breaking off from corporate culture and starting your own thing. So you already have an idea of what you want to do. You already know, chances are, who you want to work with and who you want to read the book. So that's part of the planning process. You have to figure out who you want to read it to actually be able to write that book to that person. And that is a big part of what I do when I'm working with my clients. One of the first things we do is actually sit down and talk about who is going to read this book. And you don't have to say, oh, I bet my mom would buy a copy. Of course your mom's going to buy a copy. Of course your, you know, super supportive aunt's going to buy a copy. Of course your friend's going to buy a copy. Those aren't the people we're worried about buying copies. We're worried about getting to the people who most need to hear your story. And that's why you're writing it to begin with. You know, your mom's going to be proud of you anyway and buy a copy of that book. So don't worry about her. She would be proud of you if you drew a stick figure in it and published it. She would probably tell all her friends and be thrilled. So don't worry about that sort of thing. Just worry about the people who you need to help the most. And if you keep that in mind, and I know I keep saying this over and over, keep that in mind, and that's going to get you through the writing process so much easier than sitting there worrying about, oh gosh, who's going to read this? Why would they bother reading it? I probably shouldn't be writing because I am not a writer. I'm a terrible writer. I don't write. I'm a speaker. I don't write. I'm a welder. Or, you know, whatever it is that you've got going on in your head. If you are presenting your story to the world, it's going to come right from your heart, and it does a lot better than you could even possibly imagine. So whenever you want to ensure success by, you know, building your audience with this book, you have to have that plan. Make sure you have that plan to begin with. A couple other things about the actual book too. If you are you know, if you're doing a hard copy of your book, which I absolutely recommend doing digital and hard copy, make sure that the cover is directed at that target market. You know, you're not just running on, hey, I wrote a book and I'm amazing. You know, you're probably not Kim Kardashian, you're not Oprah, you're not a politician that's, you know, got a million people following them on social media. If you're just a regular person trying to make a big difference, then you have to use all the tools that you can access. And one of them is the book cover itself. So you write an amazing book and then you put it in this beautiful package that is directed at your target market. You know, you can work with a coach on the interior and then work with somebody who's a professional on the exterior of the book. Get a professional headshot if you want to be on the cover of that book. And I do recommend, if it's your story, to be on the cover of that book, because you are going to be connecting with that audience and they're going to see it in your eyes how proud you are of that story, and they're going to want to read it. So make sure you've got that picture on the cover. Make sure you have professional design. Make sure that the back verbiage is something that your ideal audience is going to pick up and go, oh, this is speaking directly to me. This person knows my problems. This person understands what my fears are, and this person has the solution, and it's in this book. I don't have a book laying here, or I'd be waving a book. It's in this book right here. So when you work with, your plan, having your coaching, your marketing, an idea of what you want to do with that book. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's not a standalone. It's not just something you can give your kids to reach the cookie jar. It's not just sitting up on my shelf there and, looking pretty. That's not what a book is for. A book is a connection tool, and you have to use it as a connection tool. And if you think about it that way, that can kind of quell that author fear of no one's going to read this, because you have to replace that fear with the right people are going to read it, and I'm going to make sure that they can get it. I'm going to make sure I can write it and get it into their hands, because this is what they need to help solve their big problems. So, you are worthy of sharing your story. You're worthy of getting that book out there, and you're worthy of connecting with that bigger audience, so you can make a bigger impact and you can stake your claim in your industry as a leader. And if that's what you want, then you need to sit down and plan out that book. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that today. And then tomorrow I'm going to be doing the final video in the series. This one is on hitting your upper limit. And that is another big fear. And I do want to say that there are lots of author fears. I'm just covering 3 really big ones this week. So if you sit down and you start feeling like, oh, I can't write this book because, and you have an excuse, start digging at that. Sit down and say, okay, well, what's behind this excuse? To use the example today, what's behind this fear that no one's going to read it? Why do I feel like no one's going to read it? Why would no one read my work? What is going on here? Sit down, write a little bit about that, and that's going to be a big, big help to you. So you can get over that fear, get that book out there, and be a leader. So join me tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm not going to be on at 9:30. I am at Pittsburgh Women's Mastermind. We have meetings every month, and I love going to those. So I'm going to be there tomorrow morning, but I will be back on here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Make sure that you like my business page, check out the video from yesterday, and then join me tomorrow, July 11th at 1 p.m. when we are going to talk about your upper limit. So have a good day, and I hope to see you on here tomorrow.